Hello, hello, hello. Thank you so much, everybody, for being here today. So I'm seeing you come in. I'll just do a little bit of housekeeping with everybody as people just begin to come in. So as you've come in, you'll notice that your accounts are on mute just for the session while I'm going through everything. And then at the end, we will do a Q&A. So at that point, if you have any questions, and feel free as well throughout the talk just to note them in the chat as well. So if you do have something that springs to mind and you just want to get it out so you don't forget it, then drop it in the chat and I'll take a look at that at the end, or save it until the end and you can unmute yourself and you can ask a question. Amazing, perfect. So we have more people coming in. And as well, I just want to say, by the way, so my camera's here, which is where I'm going to be looking at, but I can see you on my screen here. So if I'm looking down, it's because I also want to see your faces. So where possible as well, have your camera on. I love being able to see your faces, be able to see who I'm speaking with, be able to as well see how you're taking in the content, if you're agreeing with. So feel free to put your cameras on. There you go. Lovely to see you. Hello, Valentin, if I'm pronouncing that correctly. Sarah, Ellie. Thank you for having your cameras on. Rochelle, Sarah, Verity, Kristen. Amazing. Wonderful. Well, we will get started. It is an absolute pleasure to be with you all today. And I really appreciate your time because I know I'm a parent of three and I know and respect how busy the day is. So whether you are calling in from the office or you're at home, I don't take your time lightly, and I will do my best to give you as much value as I can in the next hour. And I'm really grateful to have you on this call. The impact of media is something that I deeply care about. And obviously, it's something that you deeply care about as well. And it's something we all probably worry about as well. You know, we love our children, we want the best for them, we want them to be happy, healthy, we want them to have great friendships and relationships, be resilient, be resourceful, and grow up ready for the world around them. Or maybe we even want them to be able to change the world around them for the better. And whether it's any one of those things, their media is going to have a big role to play in influencing their development. But the thing is, the impact of media, it's not something that we were ever taught growing up. And it seems like there are so many different ways that it can harm our children. And it can feel like an overwhelming responsibility to manage for our kids. And maybe it's something we even struggle to manage for ourselves. So maybe your relationship with media and technology, maybe it's something that you actually struggle with, or maybe you feel negatively affected by. And I know it can be hard to manage our own habits, let alone guide somebody that we really care about in this space. But what I hope to be able to share with you today is not only ways to make your media environment safe at home, but to actually empower your kids to use it well and to share ways that your media habits can be used to not only protect your mental health and your kids' well-being, but actively enhance it. And so the purpose of this session, it's not about banishing media and tech, because there are actually so many benefits to being online. So being digitally skilled, it is going to be a requirement for all of our children to be employable or even start their own business, right? So we know that tech is driving the next wave of workers, whether it's AI, virtual reality, biotech, robotics, or even marketing. It is going to require digital skills. And even if we think beyond the careers that our children might have, the internet offers really incredible educational opportunities. So what we now have available online, this can allow our kids to learn specialized skills that might otherwise be out of reach for our children. So we're going to touch on that a little bit later. But one of the things I do want to acknowledge is that whilst there are benefits, we all know that there are a lot of digital distractions and even harms online that can seriously interfere with the well-being of our kids. And there are going to be a lot of different organizations that will speak to you and your children about how to protect yourself against digital harm. And as a parent, I'm incredibly grateful that they exist because it is really, really important to know about what dangers that we need to be aware of and how to protect ourselves against them. But today, what I'd like to do is just shift the focus away from digital harm to actually digital health and well-being. So create an example of what good looks like. And before I do, I just want to tell you a little bit about how I became so passionate about media literacy as a tool to support mental health and well-being. And this is because when I was 22, my media diet led me to have a breakdown. So I had extremely high levels of anxiety. I was having panic attacks and depression began creeping in. And the thing that was sort of wild to me at the time is that I didn't even have any particular extreme relationship with the media. I wasn't online for hours a day. I wasn't consuming any kind of extreme content. But what I was doing is I was watching the news every single day as part of my degree. And this had an incredibly big impact on me. And I found myself becoming increasingly depressed about the world that I was about to step into. So, just by a show of hands, who here on the call might find the news depressing at times? Yeah, right. There's a lot of hands going up. Absolutely. And for me, it went really, really deep. So I began feeling overwhelmingly anxious. I was incredibly scared for my future. And I had this like real sense of disappointment in humanity, and it was having a real impact on my mental health. So I did what a lot of people do. I tried to switch off. So again, just by a show of hands, who here has ever either wanted to or actually switched off from the news at some point to be able to protect their mental health? Right? Again, lots of hands. A lot of us might do that. And I was one of those people. Um, but what I found was that this didn't actually help me. It did make me feel slightly less bad, slightly less often, but it didn't make me feel significantly better. So I did something else instead. I actively, and what felt like desperately at the time, went in search of stories about solutions, stories about progress, stories about people fixing the world and making it a better place. And this one small shift, this one change in my media diet had such a big impact on my life. At the time, instead of feeling this sense of despair, I began to see hope. And instead of having this fear of others, I felt a faith in others. And instead of feeling helpless, I started to feel empowered. So that tiny tweak, that little shift to my media diet, it actually transformed my anxiety into optimism. And so it is no exaggeration to say that changing my media diet changed my life. And what this did was it sparked an obsession, a 12-year obsession with understanding the impact of media on mental health. So when I first experienced this for myself, I went back to university. I did a master's in positive psychology, focusing specifically on media impact. When I left, I wrote a book called You Are What You Read, Why Changing Your Media Diet Can Change the World. And at the time, I was teaching journalism students and adults about the impact of the negativity bias in the news and how to create a more constructive media, both from an industry side, but also for ourselves. And then COVID hit in 2020. And my kids, they were much smaller at the time. And I had this rising fear because I knew that even with everything that I had learned, I also learned that I couldn't be an effective mediator between my kids and their information environment. I actually realized that they needed these skills way earlier than I had them in life, especially because media plays such a bigger role in their lives than when we were children. And more importantly than that, I didn't want my kids to break before they needed fixing. I didn't want them to have to go to that kind of dark space that I found myself in at one point. I just wanted them to understand media influence and media impact from an early age so that they could make sense of this huge and often invisible force in their lives. And I wanted them to understand that media will have a big influence on their life. It's going to shape their thoughts, their mindset, their relationships, and it can even impact their physical health as well. More importantly than this, I wanted to show them how to leverage this influence to actually improve their well-being. And that is why I am so passionate about this, because I don't want my kids to simply be consumers of media. I want them to be masters of it. I want them to know how to use media as a tool that can actually improve the quality of their lives rather than accidentally damage it. And I recently had the privilege of building a curriculum for year 6 students. So I built a curriculum, it was called Media Diet for Mental Health. And I taught it last term to a school in South London. And I just want to share with you some of the things that we went through because we're going to be talking about some of them today. And I think it's going to be a relevant frame for how we're going to set up this session together. So in this session with year 6s, we looked at the key pillars of their well-being, and we looked at how your media diet actually impacts them. We also looked at how our brains work and how we can work in alignment with them to improve mental health and personal success. And that's because one of the things that I always say about media platforms is they're not just media platforms, they're kind of psychology platforms. They know how our brains work, they know how to optimize content to be able to grab our attention. And so when they have such a deep understanding of how our brains work, we should also have some understanding of that too, so that we are also able to be the driver of our attention. We were also looking at habit formation. So we were looking at habit forming tech and understanding how habits are formed so that we could kind of understand the mechanisms to actually build our own healthy habits. And finally, we looked at how to use media not just on purpose, but use it in purpose, where their media habits fuel their potential and support their goals in life. And I am so pleased to have the opportunity today to speak with you too. So we're going to cover some of these. And in this session, I'm going to share 3 of the most essential pieces to help you set up a media environment at home to keep your kids safe and empower them to guide this area of their life in a very healthy way. But before I do this, a really important starting point to help your kids is just get them to understand one thing. If there's one thing they take away from anything that you're going to share with them from this session, let it be this. Media is not neutral. It will have an impact on their lives. It will either help them in some way or it might harm them in some way. But media will never do nothing. And when I'm speaking to my kids about it, I like to compare media to food. So just like the food that we eat is going to have an impact, or I should say the quality of the food we eat and the quantity is going to have an impact on our physical health, the quantity and the quality of the media that we consume is going to have a direct effect on our mental health and well-being. And when you frame it in that way, when you think about media in that way, it becomes easier for them to understand why intentional choices matter. So I am now going to take you through the 3 steps that we are going to cover. Now, step number 1, this is about having a map, having the right guide. And one thing I want to start by saying, when we have a map, you don't necessarily need a whole A to Z. You just need the route that you need to be going on, right? So you don't need to know everything. And I'm going to explain that in a little bit. Now, the fact that you're on this call shows that this is a topic that you care about. And I imagine that you've already taken some steps to potentially manage this in some way in your home, right? But when it comes to media, and this is something I really sympathize with, especially someone who studies it so deeply, is that when it comes to media, the goalposts are always moving, right? Does anyone here, just by a show of hands, does anyone here feel like they just can't keep up with the latest research, the newest apps or the latest trends? There's always new information coming up and it can be hard to keep on top of, right? Yeah, a lot of us feel like that. And you're in the majority because, forgive me, my slides have just jumped. Research shows that over 60% of parents feel like they lack the control over their children's online experience. They feel like they're not necessarily equipped. The environment keeps changing and it can be hard to actually keep on top of it. And this isn't just your fault. They do actually keep changing. So the average app, this is some research by Pew Research Center, shows that the average app usage changes by 30% each year. So just when you figured out one space, your child might have moved on to another. And many parents that I've spoken to feel overwhelmed. They feel like they don't have the time, or maybe they don't know where to turn to for the kind of support and up-to-date information that they actually need. So what I'm going to share with you in a moment is going to help with that. And it's going to help you in a way that does not leave you feeling overwhelmed. Because so often we do. We feel like we need to know everything about every platform, every app, every device, just to keep our kids safe. But the truth is we don't, right? And here's why. There is a difference between just in case information and just in time information. And so I'm just going to explain these a little bit. So just in case information, this is trying to know everything about everything in advance, just in case you need to know something. It is exhausting and it's overwhelming. And when you take this approach, it can make media management feel like an impossible task. And so you might just decide, we'll just switch the whole thing off because it's too much, there's too many things, and it's overwhelming to actually manage. And then there's just-in-time information. So this is about sourcing what you need in real time based on the specific situation that you're dealing with or that you anticipate coming up. So it's focused and it's far less overwhelming and it's much more effective. So that's what I want to introduce you to today. And the way that I'm going to do this is by giving you a ChatGPT prompt to help you better understand the apps that your kids are using or maybe would like to use, as well as give you step-by-step guidance to make sure that your child's apps are set up safely and that harmful features are turned off. So here is the prompt. And don't worry, by the way, if you don't manage to take it down, feel free to take a screenshot. But at the end of this talk, I'm going to give you a link to a downloadable resource where it's going to have everything that I've spoken about, plus some more things to be able to help you on your way. But the ChatGPT prompt that I'd like to share with you today is this. Hey, ChatGPT, I'm a parent of insert your kid's age who's started using, and here you can insert the app on there. And again, be specific with which device you're using. And you can even put the make in as well, because I know that the settings are different on different devices. And I'm looking to ensure that they're both safe and making positive use of the app. Could you help me understand the following? Number one, safety overview. Could you provide an overview of the most up-to-date research or expert findings of the potential benefits or harms of app for children of, and then insert your age? I want to understand both the opportunities and risks. Number two, disabling habit-forming features. Can you guide me on how to turn off habit-forming features like autoplay, notifications, to reduce screen addiction tendencies? Setting up safety features. I'd like to block inappropriate content, protect their privacy, and manage who can interact with them. Can you show me how to enable these safety features step by step? Then the next one is encouraging positive use. How can I help my child use, and I put TikTok in here, but by all means, put in whichever one. I put that actually because one of the year 6 students, or a lot of the year 6 students, surprisingly, were using TikTok. This was for a presentation as well that I used for the parents of that community. In a way that enhances their well-being. Any tips on incorporating growth mindset principles and positive psychology would be great. And lastly, talking to my child. Can you suggest how I might explain these settings to my child in a way that makes them feel included and understand the why behind these protections? I would like them to feel empowered and not restricted. Please could you answer each question one by one so that I may ask up any follow-up questions against each point. Now that's a really thorough prompt that you can give ChatGPT, and it will give you really thorough and specific answers. And you can personalize it. This is just a template, so feel free to personalize it however you want, put in any additional detail, any particular struggles that you might be facing or any particular desires you want to create, and it will help tailor that to actually meet the needs that you have in real time with specific information. So I found that to be a really helpful prompt. And you can use it as well without needing to be a tech expert. And it means hopefully you won't actually be overwhelmed by the details and you'll be empowered by the information that you actually need to be able to help your child at home. Now, for some of you, this might be enough. For others, it might feel like fairly surface level stuff. But what it does give you is some really important basics. And that's going to provide you a really helpful foundation. And if you want to, by all means, you can go deeper, you can ask follow-up questions, or you can be asked to be pointed in the direction where you might want to learn more about specific things. But as I said, at the end of the session, I'm going to give you a link where you can download all of the resources and prompts. So don't worry about if you didn't catch it now. So that's step number one, is using ChatGPT to get real-time guidance. I know I'm moving through this quite quickly, but I want to be able to give you a chance to ask any questions at the end. So that's step number one. And something I am really mindful about before I move on to step number two is speaking about the news, only because I feel like I couldn't do this webinar justice without including it, because it's something that had such a negative impact on my mental health, and it's something that's so readily available. And it might not be something that we often consider. And most of you on the call are the week junior subscribers. And I would say that's an incredible place to start because it's age appropriate news and it does take a much more balanced approach to a lot of the stories that they might hear and give them good guidance. But something to be mindful of outside of that is when they're exposed to adult news, right? Because it might not necessarily be designed with so much consideration. And maybe it's something we have on in the background. Maybe it's news bulletins that pop up on our radio. Maybe we have newspapers lying around at home. But the reason I want to share with this is because something I learned super early on in my research is that the news does not report everything that goes on. And this is super important for your kids to know too, especially when it comes to adult news, is that the news does not report everything that goes on. It reports everything that goes wrong. It is so highly geared towards the negative in such a deeply unhealthy way for so many reasons that I could run a whole nother webinar on it. But why I'm telling you this is because your kids pick up on this and they can develop a lens of negativity about the world and their future. And I just want to ask you, and I'd like you to put in the chat for this. I'd love to ask you, at what age do you think that children start or young people start getting affected by the negativity bias in the news? So if you can, just drop it in the chat. I'd love to see some of the answers that come in. 8, 10, 11, 8 to 10, 6, 8, 12, 10, question mark? Don't worry, I'll give you the answer in a minute. 4, 5, 7, great, yeah. So we're thinking it begins to start early on. And what I'd love to do, yeah, thank you. 2, possibly. I mean, this clip, we'll see. But what I did, I used to watch the program Secret Life of Six-Year-Olds. I don't know if anyone else used to watch that on Channel 4. And it was sort of like a big brother of a child's school where you got to have a window in and you got to see the day in the life of a 6-year-old. And one night I was watching it and this came on and I had to record it because I just thought, wow, this is so in line with what we're trying to understand better. So I'm just going to play this clip for you now. Oh, no, I'm not. Hang on. Let me see if I can play it for you. Can you hear?
Pictures. Sorry, I'm just having a snack. Okay. Oh, he's Sky News.
Yeah, this is a Sky News program. So they're actually enacting how events are communicated in the adult world.
So,
is it not audible? I'm seeing that it's not audible. Sound breaking up. It's a bit patchy. Okay, well, I won't make you sit through it in that case. But what it is, and I'll just describe it, and I'm not going to sound as sweet as they do when they're talking about these terrible life events. But they are talking about it's become audible in the end, started working towards the end. Do you want me to try and play it? Thumbs up if you want me to play it. Should I try again? Yeah, okay, I'll try again. Thumbs up.
this is what Pictures. Sorry, I'm just having a snack. Okay.
Oh, he's Sky News. Yeah, this is a Sky News program. So they're actually enacting how events are communicated in the adult world.
So, what was there was a train attack on a French train to Paris. The god and he even killed the conductor. Yeah. Sad news, isn't it?
International terrorism is now becoming a theme of play among 6-year-olds. I'm not sure I want to think about that. No, but it does mean it's important to be talking to children about these things so they understand the significance of the event and the value that adults attach to them.
Because they know about it.
They know about it and they're talking about it with each other.
Yes.
In Surrey on the S21. They don't know why, but they're gonna find out.
Okay, so I'm really sorry for the people whose sound that was patchy for. But thumbs up if most of you heard it or was able to get the gist. So they were talking about a plane attack. They were talking about a stabbing. Yeah, they were talking about a freight train being hijacked. And the reason that I show this is because, the news will teach kids about stabbing, bombs, wars, attacks. But what it will also do is it will edit out a lot of the narrative, the stories of progress, of innovation, of peace building, of solutions, and of compassion. it will leave out so many valuable stories that actually give us hope and agency. And so as a parent, it's really up to you to edit them back in because they are there. But if you don't actively look for them, you won't often see them because, as they say in the news, if it bleeds, it leads. So it's not high on the news agenda. So if you want to have your kids have a much more balanced and accurate picture of reality, you sort of need to balance this bias that they're exposed to through the news. And so I just want to share with you 3 of my favorite adult solutions focused news sources that you can use to be able to also talk about some events with your kids. So the Week Junior does a wonderful job of actually giving that balance, giving that hope and that context and compassion, and give all of those things that I was speaking about. But if you think about this for your own media diet and news you might have on in the house, then there's Fix the News, there is Positive News, and there is Squirrel News. So they are 3 that I really like and recommend. And again, I think they're in the resources at the end. So when you include something like this, you widen the lens, you see a more complete picture of reality, right? So now I know that was a slight sidetrack, but I feel like I just had to slip that in. So the first step, jumping back to the first step, ChatGPT, giving yourself real-time support. So now I want to move on to step number 2. And I know that so many of us feel the weight of managing our kids' media habits. And we can often think of ourselves as the gatekeepers who need to design and enforce the rules around safe media use. And it was exactly this burden that I felt as a parent that actually made me redirect my work towards kids. Because as I mentioned, I had realized even with everything that I had learned, I couldn't be their filter. They needed to learn what I had learned so that they could become a resource and an advocate for themselves and be able to rely on their own understanding. So today I want to invite you to consider building media habits, not just for your kids, but actually building media habits with your kids. Giving your children a sense of agency and involvement in setting their media boundaries. And this can have really powerful effects. So research shows that involving kids in setting their own limits, then it actually means they are more likely to respect and follow them. And research also shows that it empowers them to make better media choices independently. Now, the first thing that I'm sure is jumping to your mind is that my kids can't manage their media use any more than they could resist a snack when the cupboard's open, right? One of my clients that I was working with recently, he felt so strongly about this. He was adamant that his child would not make healthy choices on their own. And I agree, right? What is super important to understand is that this isn't about giving your kids complete autonomy. And obviously this is going to vary with certain ages, but it's not about giving complete autonomy. Instead, it's about inviting their voice and perspective into the process so that they feel ownership without absolute freedom. So I want to break down how you can actually implement this in a way that's simple and powerful and actually works. But before I do, I just want to caveat this by saying that the framework that I'm sharing with you assumes that your child is using age-appropriate apps. So as I mentioned, the year 6s that I was speaking with, a lot of them were using TikTok, which is a social media platform. And I think the age limit for social media platforms in this country, at least, is 13 and up. And some experts are even pushing for 16 plus, and it's been adopted in some other countries at that age. So it's super important that choosing age-appropriate apps will begin to at least have a first step of reducing the exposure to harmful content and help your child use technology in a way that fits their development. So if you're someone who shares a device with their child, you can actually set up separate profiles. So if you want your kids to have access to the same device that you use, but you don't want them to have access to some of the apps that aren't necessarily age appropriate, you can set up different profiles. So again, you can ask ChatGPT how you can do that so that you can get real-time guidance. But once you've set that up, once they have their own space, or if they're sharing yours, the way that I would suggest having a conversation with how you set up those boundaries at home and what good looks like is, and I did this with the year 6 students as well, it's called the jar of life exercise. And I love this. It is one of my favorite positive psychology interventions. It was one of my favorite when I was studying it. It's still one of my favorites now. And it's called the jar of life. So you can use it when talking about setting up healthy media habits at home to make sure that they're actually living their best life. So this can be a really helpful guide to conversation. So the way that you say it is you imagine a jar, right? And the jar represents your life. And the rocks are the really big stuff that matters most. So your health, your relationships, your well-being, the things that are essential for your base level of existence, right? For you to live a good life. And so what you do is you don't have to physically do this. A psychology professor actually did this. And he said to his students, you know, if I was to fill all of the rocks all the way to the top, would the jar be full? And they say yes. And then he says, okay. And he takes out a big bag of pebbles. And again, I just did this with the kids' imagination. I didn't have the actual props in class. And I said, and then he tipped a load of pebbles into the jar and he shook them all down. And so they filled all of the spaces with the rocks. And he again asked the students, is the jar now full? So they said yes. And then he picked up a bag of sand and he poured it in and he shook it down, right? And he filled the jar so that it was all full. And what he explained to his students, the pebbles are the things that are important. So we've got the rocks, which are the essential things, the things that are absolutely necessary. And then you have the pebbles, which are important, but they're not as essential. So they're going to be things like your interests, your goals. And then there's the sand. So these are things that are not important, but just take up time. And the thing that's incredible about putting them in this order is this is the only way it fits, right? So if you put the sand in first, then there's not going to be enough space for the pebbles and the rocks. So it is super important to understand that this is the only order that they actually fit, where the jar is full, where you have a full filled jar, right? And remember, the jar is the jar of life, so you have a full filled life if you put them in this order. If you put them in a different order, you might be leaving out some really important things that actually make your life, design your life how you want it to. And what we did with the students and what you can do with your kids is get them to write them down. So what are your rocks? What are the things that are incredibly important to you, that are really, really important that we put in first? And then get your kids to write down, or at least have a conversation with you about what are the pebbles? What are the things that light them up, that make them excited about life, that are important to them? And then you can talk about sand, right? Where is sand? What is sand? And most of my students put media in their sand space. And what was really interesting when we did this is it actually allowed us to say, okay, well, when we're planning for our day, when we're planning for our week, what order do we need to put these in? So you can frame your activities and priorities and set guidance around them. So you could ask, for example, what is essential for you to include in your day? What are the rocks, right? And maybe, or what are the pebbles? And they might be homework, hobbies, seeing friends, exercise, screen time. They might have all of these different things that they want in their day. And you can ask them, which are the rocks? Which are the pebbles? Which are the sand? And if you wanted to even facilitate deeper conversation, you can ask them, well, why is this important to you? And encourage your kids to understand the value of each priority and what happens if they do or don't follow through. And the reason that this is really helpful, the reason that you're helping them identify what are the rocks, what are the pebbles, and what are the sands, and then connecting it with some kind of value-based question, why is this important to you, is because it can help stimulate a level of internal motivation, right? Because that's the end goal, is that we want kids to be able to participate, at least from an early age, in managing this for themselves as well. And once you've done this, it then becomes easier to plan a day, because you know what needs to be done first and how much time you'll have left. So you know if you want to do this or that, how much time will you have left to spend on TV or gaming. And so they actually are participating in setting their own limits, and they feel ownership over their choices. And lastly, one of the things that I loved about what one of the students said is about how you can turn your sand into pebbles, right? Because not all screen time needs to sit in sand. And I thought that this was incredible. And I've built kind of a piece around it because we had such a lively conversation about it. Honestly, it was amazing speaking to these 10-year-olds about it. But if your child does have a specific goal, like maybe they want to become a chef, for example, you can encourage them to see how media can support that goal. So they could follow cooking channels, they could watch tutorials, they could even create their own content about what they're learning. And this way, media becomes a tool for growth, not just passive entertainment. And so this is one of the ways that you can upgrade your kids' media habits from being sand to becoming pebbles. And this can help your kids actually align their media habits with their goals instead of being something that distracts them from them. And so if you use this system, it can be a really helpful way to just create a bit of shared vocabulary and a kind of easy access to be able to have these more strategic conversations about media use. And when you do this, you're not just setting up a system for healthy media use, you're also teaching your child a life skill, how to manage their time and priorities. Because the end goal of this isn't just having less screen time, but it's having more intentional, fulfilling media use that contributes to their overall well-being and growth. And this can be a really helpful starting point. And if you want to formalize it even further, a conversation can be great. I don't know about you, since having kids, my memory is definitely tanked. And so one of the ways that you can kind of crystallize this conversation as well is that you could create a family media plan. And this includes things like screen time limits. You could create tech-free zones or tech-free times. You could list your shared expectations and create clear guidance for device use. But by involving them in this, they feel like they own the plan. This isn't just mum and dad's rules, it's a family commitment, and you're teaching them self-regulation because they help create the rules. And by the way, there are some really great resources for kids to be able to upgrade their screen time. So that, helping them move it from being sand to becoming pebbles. And I've just realized they are on here now. I'm going to just rush through them rather than read through them, but all of these are going to be on the downloadable resource at the end, right? So here's a few that I really think are very helpful, whether they're creative tools, well-being tools, learning resources. But again, I'd like to give you a ChatGPT prompt, and again, take a screenshot, or I will give this to you in the resource, but you can say, hey, ChatGPT, please can you list creative, well-being, learning tools for and apps, for kids aged, insert your kid's age, with an interest in, insert your specific interest, that encourage self-expression, artistic skills, and emotional well-being. Again, feel free to edit that, add in anything that your kid has a specific interest in, or anything that they particularly shine at. Include apps that focus on different creative areas like drawing, storytelling, music creation, animation, photography, coding, game design, building, and journaling. And again, fill that in as ever you please. And then you can say for each app, provide a brief description of how it works, its age suitability, and how it supports both creativity and cognitive or emotional development. So again, fiddle around with it, make it your own based on your specific circumstance. But again, this can just be a very helpful guide to shortcut your searches and be able to connect you with great resources in a really quick way. And then beyond this, right? So we've spoken about how we can actually set this up for our kids at home. But beyond this, how do you extend beyond the home, right? You've taken the steps to set it up, but what about when your kid goes to someone else's house? And I know some parents feel really nervous about this part. And I do too. But I think there is something that we can definitely do to be able to support our kids outside of the home as well in a way that doesn't feel overbearing or make any other family feel uncomfortable. And you can just check in. The power of a friendly check-in. When your friend's going into a house or a sleepover, feel comfortable speaking to one of the other parents and saying, I hope you don't mind me asking. I just want to check that my child won't have access to any unsupervised digital devices during the night, or whatever it is that you are particularly concerned about. Most parents won't mind you bringing this up, and you're giving them permission to talk about it too, right? So just be open to speaking about it. You don't necessarily have to be dogmatic about it, but you can open up a conversation, especially if your child is going to be in the care of somebody else. And feel free as well to share your family approach. If something's working for you and it's been effective, again, not in a preachy way, but if it's helpful for you, it might be helpful for someone else too. Teach your kids to self-advocate. So if you've spoken about what good looks like at home and they find themselves in a situation where they feel uncomfortable, just give them some conversational choices to be able to help them move into a different space. Like, hey, should we go and play a different game? Or I want to do something else, or just something to help them move out of that space without confrontation. And lastly, follow up with your child. So when they've gone to a sleepover or a play date, again, it can be casual, but just ask them how it went and leave a door open for if there's anything that they saw online or on TV that they might want to talk to you about. So if you add in these steps, you can reinforce the healthy habits that you set up at home, and you can help your child extend these boundaries beyond, right? So step one, ChatGPT, real-time support. Step 2, framing constructive conversations at home around media and tech use. And the third thing I want to talk about that often gets overlooked is your own media habits as parents, right? You've got to put your own mask on before you put somebody else's on, because the truth is, it can be really hard to teach our kids something that we're not very good at ourselves. And as much as we wish it wasn't true, our kids notice everything that we do. They see our habits, and whether we like it or not, they are learning from them. And I get it, it's not easy. We all have media as some kind of relaxation crutch at some point in our day, perhaps. But just know that how your kids see media might model it for themselves as well. So if we want our kids to see media as a tool in their life rather than a crutch in their life, we have to model that intentional use ourselves. And so it starts by looking at our own routines. But again, involve your kids. Give yourself permission to be imperfect. My kids love it when I'm imperfect. And so you can be transparent as well. You can let your kids know that potentially it's something you're working on as well. You could say something like, I'm trying to cut back on checking my phone mindlessly. So if you see me, kind of picking up without intention, or I don't know, maybe you've been on it for too long, just remind me. And what this does as well is it gives you an opening to be able to remind your kids as well, right? It's not just one direction, it's coming from both sides, and that can be really helpful. And when your kids see you putting in the effort, it becomes part of a shared goal. They're not following another rule. You're doing kind of a family exercise together, and it builds mutual respect and reinforces the fact that this is something that you're all tackling together. And whilst we do much more for our kids often than we do for ourselves, this isn't just about setting a good example for your kids. This is about building media habits that actually improve your mental health, that lower your levels of stress, and that improve your well-being. And I would really love to support you to achieve this. And this is something that I've become super passionate about. As I said, I began with adults, I shifted towards kids, but really it all starts with us first. And so I have an online course called Master Your Media, Master Your Mind. And this helps you transform your media habits from a source of stress and distraction and anxiety into fuel for well-being, for purpose, and for productivity. And included in it is there's some bonus hacks. You'll get a couple of these actually by being on the call today. But more importantly, you'll get the curriculum, which is 6 modules. I think it's about a 3-hour program. And it takes you through this whole process so that you can master this area for yourself. And this will give you the flexibility to be an incredible resource for your kids, because you'll have it within you as well. We can't necessarily give what we don't have. And so if any of you would like to join that course or learn more about it, there's a QR code on the screen now. So feel free to take a screenshot or take a picture with your phone. And I think, Karen, if you're able to drop in the link, it will be on the chat as well for if you would like to sign up for it. But for now, I really hope that these 3 things that I've shared with you today, so how to use ChatGPT to set up healthy settings in real time, how to have positive conversations with your kids about where media and tech fits into their lives, and modeling healthy media habits at home, have been helpful in supporting you create healthy media habits for you and your family. And what I'm going to do now as well is just share with you the QR code to be able to download the resources, which will give you the ChatGPT prompts. Thank you, Karen. So Karen's put a link to the course, and you can take a screenshot or take a picture with your phone of the resource guide, and that'll take you to a link where you can download it. And Karen will also pop it in the, let me just see, yeah, in the chat as well. Amazing. So thank you so much, everybody, for your time, for still being here. I know that this can feel like a really overwhelming area of our life. And creating media habits that support mental health and well-being, it's entirely possible, even in the digital chaos that we live in. So you don't have to be overwhelmed. You certainly don't have to do it alone. I am here to support you in whichever way I can if we stay connected. And I would love to answer any questions that you might have now. So if you have a question, if you can just raise your hand. So at the bottom, you'll have a react button. And if you click on the react button, there's an option that says raise hand. So if you could just raise your hand if you have any questions. We've got about 15 minutes left of this session. I would be happy to answer any. Oh, you're welcome, Dawn. I'm glad that you found it interesting. And chances are, if you have a question in your own head, what I found, especially in group settings, is it's never just one person that feels that. Chances are, if someone's asking a question, there's a lot of other people that feel it too. I appreciate your time and I don't want you to stay for any longer than you need to. So if you'd like to hop off now, if this has been valuable, then by all means, jump off. And if you've got a question, Liz, I see you. I'm just going to quickly see. We've got one question here. You're welcome, Rona. What do you do if your child has seen something in the media that's disturbing? That's a great question. And I think this comes back to the importance of having constructive conversations with your kids, right? Because it's not just about creating safe spaces for our children online. It's about becoming safe spaces for our children so that we become a space where they come and speak to us about things like that. The first thing that I would say is don't presuppose their experience, right? If they've seen something disturbing, we might layer it through our own filter of what we think they might be feeling or how we might be feeling. And one of the best things that you can do is to ask questions, be able to get a better understanding of their experience. How did it make you feel? How did you get access to it? What they feel they need as well. And then also, again, you can use, I really think ChatGPT is a very helpful resource to be able to point you in the right directions or even ask some of those questions. We're not all trained coaches. We're not all trained parent psychologists, and we might not necessarily have those answers or know what to say in that moment. So you can always lean on resources like that. But the more that you can talk to your child about it, and this is what I mean about having something to give, right? If you can reach out to resources online to get real-time support, but when you understand this area of your life and you understand media's impact and you understand how to master this for yourself, you'll have the kind of conversational flexibility to be able to guide your child through it. You'll be able to kind of understand their experience and know how to potentially support them to create healthier spaces for themselves as well. So I think the first thing is be a safe space. Always have an open dialogue and supportive dialogue between children and their media experiences. Seek help online if you need specific questions that you don't know how to answer or how you might be able to support your child in that moment. One of the emails that I send out every Monday is Monday Mind Fuel, of helping people turn their media feeds into mental fuel for well-being and peak performance. And that gives you a lot of psychology understanding as well, to be able to help understand the experiences that you have or that other people might have, and some of the ways that you can combat them or mitigate them as well. So I think I hope that answers your question, but please follow up if you want any further clarification. So Liz, over to you. And I think you can just unmute yourself, Liz, but if you're having any problems, let me know. I can't see you. Okay, I'm going to jump over to Elle first, Liz, and I'll come back to you. So Elle, are you able to unmute yourself? Perfect.
Yeah, I just put the question in the chat. I work with older teenagers, and I'm interested to ask your view on how you might start to approach a teenager who's already got very entrenched media habits. They're not thriving on them, but they're really going to resist you having anything to do with them and their phone. I mean, basically, this is my private life and I'm not letting you see it. How would you start that?
It's a really great question. And so my children aren't teenagers. Before I was teaching this 10-year-olds, I had the privilege of teaching 16-year-olds. And it was incredibly difficult to begin with for them to actually recognize their experience in what I was sharing at the beginning. So for example, we were speaking about the news and they thought they didn't watch news. And so a lot of the starting work and the groundwork was helping connect the dots, because the thing about media impact is it's quite invisible. And how you actually teach the invisible, right? How you connect those dots between input and impact can be quite challenging, especially when it seems like you're kind of being judgmental. And it's not necessarily judgmental, but they might see it so. You know how I said in the talk originally about allowing children to ask you questions? If you want to be able to talk to your child about their media habits, one of the best questions that I guide parents on asking don't start with them because they'll immediately be in a position of defense. Start with you and be in a position of vulnerability, because what vulnerability does is it creates trust and connection. And it gives you an opportunity. Sorry, I know the camera's there, but I can see you here, and I just want to look at you while I'm saying this.
Don't worry.
Is when you create vulnerability, it can create trust and connection. And it also gives you a chance to model what good looks like and model taking feedback well. So you could ask your teenager, for example, what do you think of my media habits? And chances are no one in this call, myself included, nobody is squeaky clean when it comes to their media habits. So chances are they're going to have something to say, especially if it's framed in a conversation where you're talking about media and they might see where it's going. Ask them about you first. Create a little bit of vulnerability, connection, take the feedback well. Maybe even ask some follow-up questions. What would you like to see? What would, stay in that space. Don't just ask it so you can quickly jump into theirs. Be authentic in that space and have an honest conversation. And then ask permission, right? One of the best things you can do is ask permission for a conversation, especially with, I mean, this goes for anyone, not just young people. But if you think about it like this, if someone's cooking in the kitchen, they're making a mess of the meal, right? We have children who have terrible media habits. They're making an absolute mess of this meal in the kitchen. And you come in and you grab the spoon and you grab the pot. Nobody's going to like that. Even if you're helping, it doesn't feel like help. But if you ask permission, would it be okay if, hey, I had this situation, would you mind if I offered some advice of what I did in that moment? Do I have permission to speak to you about this? And they say yes. And again, this isn't seamless. This isn't always going to go completely fluidly. This is about having tools to be able to move through conversations in a less confrontational way. But once you've got permission, it gives you a lot more freedom to speak through the conversation. So I would say step number 1, model it yourself. Ask about you before them. Step number 2, seek permission. And not in a beggy way, but just like in a way that's authentic to the conversation, which allows them to stay open to you for longer. They would be my first two points. And again, for you to be a good guide, it's just something you need to know for yourself and find ways to kind of pepper in how you can help them understand how their brains work and why they might be feeling certain things. You might be able to give a perspective they can't see themselves. And so offer it from that point of view. Like my perspective isn't going to dominate you, but I have a different angle on this. So I just want to share it with you in case it's helpful. Does that make sense?
Lovely. Thank you very much. Thank you.
You're welcome. Angus, I can see your hand up.
Thank you very much indeed, Jodie, and a very interesting talk. I get the lot of discussion has been about the relationship between children and the parents. I'm kind of interested also how we differentiate between the children. I'm very aware that I have an 11-year-old, and that 11-year-old thinks like a 13-year-old because my 13-year-old is doing her thing too, and the 11-year-old wants to keep up. Do you have any advice on that?
It's a great question again, because I have 3 children, and my youngest is 4 and my eldest is 8. And sometimes I treat them all like they're 8, just because they sort of all end up blurring and blending into one and another. But I think with media especially, it's super important to understand that they're not, that they're at different stages of brain development and they're going to respond differently to certain content. In and amongst that, there's shared things that all of our brains, whether you're an adult or a child, there's ways that we respond well with media and there's ways that we respond poorly to it. But in terms of how you deal with your children differently, do you have like a specific example that I might be able to give a bit more clearer guidance on? Or is this just general how you approach it?
Well, it's to do with things like Snapchat and TikTok.
Okay.
Yes.
Perfect. So your 13-year-old is on social media platforms, your 11-year-old wants to be,
That's
but
right.
they're not age appropriate.
Exactly.
Wonderful. So I love deferring blame. If it's not my responsibility, it's the responsibility of media platforms, I will defer judgment where I can. This isn't about me saying yes or no. These are the safety guidelines that are designed by media platforms who know far more than I do about what is safe or unsafe. And so they are the guidelines that have been set by the platforms, and there's a reason for that. So one thing that I would do is lean on, if there is any external barrier to your child having access to media, lean on it, because then you are not having to carry that decision solely on your own, and you're not having to defend that decision solely on your own knowledge and expertise. You can say people far more tech savvy than I am, far more intelligent, far more, like again, my kids love it when I don't know everything. If you can defer that space of expertise beyond your own judgment, it can take the pressure off you a little bit. But if you then do want to talk about how it's used and the kind of impact it has and why it's okay for one child and why it's not. And as I said, the age guidance of some countries is 16, it's not 13. This is something that is in hot debate at the moment, so it's not even something that's fixed. But I would lean on the guidance as much as possible when it comes to different age groups. And then with your children, especially around TikTok, something that I speak to my kids about is brain health. And there is a difference between high stimulation media and low stimulation media, right? So we have a part of our brain that's the executive control center. And this is the part that is responsible for focus, for memory, and for emotional regulation and decision making. That's kind of the main role of that network. And when you consume high stimulation media, stuff like TikTok, where images flick and change very quickly, where camera shifts, where you're consuming maybe 60, 70 different pieces of content through 3 minutes, that overloads your executive functioning in your brain, and it can actually weaken it, essentially. So all of those things that I spoke about, emotional regulation, decision-making, memory, and attention, can all be compromised by that kind of media. Whereas low stimulation media, something like podcasts, something like books, actually strengthen that network. They actually help your brain build better, think clearer, have higher levels of emotional intelligence. So it's also recognizing that not all media content is created equal when it comes to impact. And so something that I always talk to my kids about, even if it's they're not old enough to be on these platforms, but kind of as a precursor for them, is just helping them understand that even if they're there, just because the age bracket says they can, doesn't mean it's healthy for your brain. Like you can have sweets, but if you have too much of them, they're going to make you sick. So it's just, again, coming back into that level of intention. Like, what are you using this for? Cool. Now let's make sure that we're using it in a way that still actually helps us function in the long term, not just distract us or entertain us in the immediate term, if that makes sense. So having that kind of understanding can help give a bit of awareness to your kids so they can think about it for themselves. But where they're different ages, definitely lean into guidance beyond you, because it will take the pressure off. And it will mean that you can both be angry at the same thing, right? Yeah, I know. It's not my fault, it's them.
Thank you.
That's okay. Anybody else? I'm just noticing, actually, we are coming up to 2 minutes left, and I will not take any more of your time. I will let you go, and I really appreciate you all being here on the call. I would love to stay connected with you. I hope the resources have been helpful, and I wish you a wonderful rest of the day. And if you have any questions that you didn't get a chance to answer, or you want to reach out to me, my email is jody@jodyjackson.com, so feel free. Oh, you're welcome, Hannah. I'm glad that it was helpful. You're welcome. Great, Emma. Thanks, Harish. You're welcome, Joanne, Rebecca, Tal, El, Risha. Oh, you're welcome. Thank you, Torty. Amazing. Thank you so much, guys. I really appreciate it. I hope you have a wonderful day. I hope this has been helpful, and I look forward to staying in touch. Bye-bye.